Okay, good day everyone. So I am Sir Mark Angelo Ticukin. So today we are going to discuss the square root. So let's discuss first what is a perfect square. A perfect square is a number that can be expressed as a product of two equal integers. Remember, squaring a number means multiplying the number by itself. Thus, the square of a number n is n times n is equal to n squared. So, for example, we are going to replace this variable n by a number. So, just like for example 4, we're going to replace n by 4. So, 4 times 4 is equal to 4 squared. Okay, squared is the same as you are going to multiply that number to itself. So that 4 squared or 4 times 4. So we have here the list of first 10 perfect square. Actually, there are many perfect square, but if we're going to write all of the perfect square, so hindi na siya kasya. So I just write or put the first 10 perfect square. So we have here 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81, 100. So these are the example of perfect square. So why do we call them as a perfect square? So look at this one. So if we are going to multiply 1 to itself, it will result 1. Okay, why do we consider 4 as perfect square? Because 2 times 2, that is 4. Why do we consider 9? Because 3 times 3 is equal to 9. Then 4 times 4, that is 16. 5 times 5, that is 25. And so on, up to 100. Because 10 times 10, that is equal to 100. So later on, you will know how important the perfect square is. While 3, 3, 5, and 10 are the examples of non or these are the non-examples of perfect squares. Because if we are going to look for the square root of 3, 5, and 10, it will result it will not result a whole number. It will result a number with a decimal point. So, how to square a number? So, to square a number, you are just going to multiply it by itself. Again, how to square a number? So, to square a number, you are just going to multiply it by itself. So, the word squared is often written as a little 2 like this. This one. Okay, this is an example of squared. So if we are going to read this equation, this is read as 4 squared equals 16. Again, it is 4 squared equals 16. Kamo daw? 4 squared equals 16. Okay, very good. So the little 2, ito, says that the number appears twice in multiplying. So look at this table. So this is an example of squaring, and this part is an example of taking the square root. So look at this one. 1 squared is equal to 1. And negative 1 squared is also equal to 1. Now, remember that negative 1 squared means you are going to multiply negative 1 to itself. So it will become negative 1 times negative 1. And remember that if we are going to multiply two negatives, it will result positive. So negative 1 times negative 1 or negative 1 squared is equal to 1. So in taking the square root, if we are going to look for the square root of 1, dalawang roots niya ang pwedeng ma-produce. 1 and negative 1. Again, the square root of 1 is 1 and negative 1. The same with this. So 5 squared is equal to 25. Also, negative 5 squared is equal to 25 because the square root of 25 is 5 and the square root of 25 is also negative 5. Again, there are two roots. The positive value and the negative are positive roots and the negative roots. And the last example, we have here the 7 squared. 7 squared or 7 times 7 is equal to 49. The negative 7 squared or negative 7 times negative 7, that is 49. So if we are going to look for the square root of 49, it can be 7 or negative 7. So remember, in taking the roots of the perfect square, dalawa ang possible na roots niya, which is the positive value and the negative value. So these are the parts of the radicals. Again, these are the parts of a radical. So look at this one. Itong n, or this n, is what we call the index. Again, itong n ito na maliit is what we call the index. Itong sa index class, if ang value ng ating index is 2, so it is not necessary to put the 2 or the value na 2. But if the index is 3 and above, you must write the value. Because if wala tayong makikita dito na value, ibig sabihin yan, that is an square root. But if there is a number written here, like for example, instead the n, we will write here 3. So that means that this is not a square root. This is ano na siya, cube root. Since the value of index is 3. So cube root or 3 means cube root. And also, this sign, itong sign ng square root natin, ito yung tinatawag na radical sign. Again, this is the radical sign. And inside the radical sign, if it is a number or an expression inside the radical, that is what we call the radicand. Radicand. Again, itong maliit na ito, this is an index. Ito, this is the radical sign. And sa loob ng radical sign, that is the radicand. Again, Sir Isaac Newton is an English mathematician who used a method of estimating the square root called divide and average method. So, principal roots of rational and irrational numbers. So, taking the square root of a number is like doing reverse of squaring a number. So, as what you have observed earlier, so there is a relation on how we square a number and also how to take the square root. So, in the previous example we have, both 5 and negative 5 are the square roots of 25, di ba? Because 5 squared is equal to 25 and negative 5 squared is also equivalent to 25. So therefore, the square roots of 25 is 5 and negative 5. Now, let us take the square root of the following perfect square. So, like for example, this one, square root of 1. So, what is the square root of 1? Square root of 1 is 1 and negative 1. Square root of 4 is 2 and negative 2. Square root of 9 is 3 and negative 3. Square root of 16 is 4 and negative 4. Square root of 25 is 5 and negative 5. Square root of 16 is 6 and negative 6. So these are the examples of how we are going to take the square roots of the following perfect square. And also, you can also take the exact value if the given if we are going to look for the square root of a perfect square with a decimal point. Like for example, we have 0.36. So the square root of 0.36 is 0.6 and negative 0.6. And the square root of 0.0025 is 0.05 and 0. A negative 0.05. So still it is a negative and a positive value. And just like, and also this one, the square root of 4 over 9. So remember that 4 and 9 is a perfect square. So we can easily identify what are the perfect square root of 4 over 9. So the square root of 4 is 2. The square root of 9 is 3. So the the square root of 4 over 9 is positive 2 over 3 and the negative 2 over 3. Notice that the square roots of the perfect squares are rational numbers. So why do we say, sir, na they are rational numbers? Because rational numbers are the numbers that can be expressed as a ratio or quotient of two integers. So hindi ibig sabihin na rational numbers is fraction lang siya or naka-ratio lang siya. So a whole number, an integer is also considered as a rational numbers, because if you are going to understand the whole number, if you can see a whole number, it is understood that there is a denominator na 1. So on the other hand, the square roots of a non-perfect squares are irrational numbers. Why, sir? Bakit daw irrational numbers ang uban square root sa ating non-perfect square? Because if we are going to look for the square root of those numbers, they are, or they will express as non-repeating and non-terminating decimals. Like for example, this one. So the square root of 2, it can be 1.41421, and so on. So this is an example of non-repeating or non-terminating the decimal, as well as this one. Square root of 5 and also the square root of 10. So these are the examples of non-repeating and the non-terminating decimals. So that is the reason why we consider them as irrational numbers. Look at this one. So if a negative real numbers, the non-negative number b such that b squared is equal to a is the principal root of a is denoted by b is equal to square root of a. So in other words, if there are two roots for a non-negative numbers, the positive and negative roots, so the positive roots is the principal roots. So in short, class, to identify what is the principal root of that number, you are just going to look what is the positive root. 'Di ba? Meron tayong dalawang 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 roots every number or every perfect square na number. Just like square root of 25, the 5 and negative 5. So the principal roots is the positive root, which is the 5. Gets? Okay, very good. So moreover, in the expression n root of a, so a is called the radicand. Yes, kabalo naman ni. And n is called the index. Yes, of course. And this one is called the radical sign. So since the root of a non-perfect square is irrational, so we cannot get its exact value. However, we can approximate its value by finding two consecutive integers that include the irrational number. So now, we are going to look between what two consecutive integers does each irrational number lie. So since we cannot give the exact whole number of every irrational numbers, so we're just going to approximate about what two consecutive integers does each irrational number lie. Kung saan daw siyang gitna na belong. Like for example, square root of, for number 1 we have square root of 14. For number 2, square root of 50. For number 3 is negative square root of 98. And number 4, the negative square root of 150. So let's start to answer number 1. Okay, for number 1, So this is the step on how to find the two consecutive perfect square. So of course, first thing after seeing the given, so think of two consecutive perfect squares that will include the radicand. Okay, 'di ba? The first given is 14, square root of 14. So you are going to look what is the nearest perfect square before 14 and after 16. Ay, after 14. So since the perfect square before 14 is 9 and the perfect square after 14 is 16. So we are going to use that perfect square. So we have here the 9 and 16. So we are going to put square root every number. So square root of 9, square root of 14, and square root of 16. So it will look like this. So if we are going to look for square root of 9, that is 3. And the square root of 16, that is 4. So it will look like this. So that means that square root of 14 is between 3 and 4. So I can't give you the exact value of square root of 14, but I teach you on how to locate which two consecutive perfect square siya na belong or asa siya between. Okay, for number 2. Question number 2, square root of 50. So think of two perfect square before 50 and after 60. So the perfect square before 50 is 49. And the perfect square after 50 is 64, right? So just like this. 49 and 64. Then put the square root of every number. Then find the square root of 49, that is 7. The square root of 64, that is 8. So therefore, the square root of 50 is between 7 and 8. Again, the square root of 50 is between 7 and 8. Now, let's proceed to the question number 3. Daw, ano nga yung number 3? So, number 3 is, what is the square root of negative, again, what is negative square root of 98? So, remember, there is a negative sign. So, paano yan, sir? So, ganito yarn. Since we have negative square root 98, so disregard muna yung negative sign. Just think of a perfect square before 98 and after 98. Are you thinking? Yes. I know what you are thinking. You are thinking 81 and 100. So we write here 100 first because it is negative. So the more number, the more lesser if in or if in negative. So that is negative 100 tapos negative 98 square root of negative ay negative of square root 98 then negative of square root 81. So if you are going to look for the negative square root of 100, that is negative 10. Take note, the radical is negative. So negative 10 and negative 9. So therefore, the square root of 98 is between negative 10 and negative 9. So between negative 10 and negative 9 daw, naglay si negative square root of 98. And for the fourth one, we have, ano nga yan? We have negative square root of 150. So think a perfect square between, or think a perfect square that is near to 150. What is the perfect square before 150 and the nearest square root after 150? So I know you are thinking with 144, and 169. Yes, you are right. So we have here 169 and 144. So we are going to put a negative square root of every number. So negative square root of 169, negative square root of 150, and negative square root of 144. So if we are going to look for the square root of these numbers, the square root of negative negative square root of 169, that is 13. And the negative square root of 144, that is 12. Negative 12. So uh, therefore, that negative square root of 150 is between negative 13 and negative 12. Mhm. So, I think that's it muna.